What are the key business challenges that a businessman faces? I mean, as a business person faces. If you're a supplier of goods and services, one of your key business challenges is bad debt. You supply material, you supply services, you don't get your money. Similarly, if you take loans from banks and if you're not in a position to service those loans based on your own bad debt problems, people are not paying you, and various other reasons. It's not always bad debt. You're having some unexpected challenges that have come into your business, which lead to your account probably becoming bad and eventually an NPA. Now, what was the option prior to IBC? Banks would typically use the SARFAESI Act, basically file cases in this forum called the DRT, Debt Recovery Tribunals, against companies. What are the options available to you as a creditor? Somebody was, especially against a company that was not paying you money for the goods that were genuinely supplied, no dispute, they just don't have the money to pay or the intent is not there. So winding up was definitely a successful option amongst the options where you would file for winding up of the company. Of course, winding up is the objective of winding up is not to recover money, but it just happened as a matter of practice in about over a period of about 15-20 years that when you file a winding up petition, the company, if the company wants to survive and doesn't want to go into liquidation stage, um, they would basically come and settle the matter within 1 or 2 years. But even then, that would take about appointment of a provisional liquidator was the first stage. If you have a good case, took about 2 to 3 years. All practical this thing, and we have been pretty much been part of that entire system. So I can, to that extent, I can tell you with some amount of conviction there. And that provisional liquidator would get converted into an official liquidator. Another 6 months, 1 year, the company would sometimes the company which is on the receiving end, in the sense the company against which you have taken an order of provisional liquidator appointment will try to get a stay and something or the other. If they want to escape themselves, they'll give you a proposal. It may or may not go through, but whatever it is, I mean, ultimately the company goes into liquidation as a trade creditor. Unlikely that you will get anything, and it's a little sad to see, but the fact remains that companies undergo liquidation processes for 10 years, 20 years. I heard a lecture in which was delivered in 2016 or 17 by a senior counsel from Delhi, a very respected senior counsel who was originally from Chennai, moved to Delhi. He was giving an example of Anubhav plantations. Their liquidation took, I think, if I'm not wrong, about 3 decades or two decades. It's going on for 20 odd years. So there are a lot of companies where this is slow, because what happens is every high court has one liquidator, and so the process is slow. Now, the other option is you file a civil suit, a civil remedy, a civil recovery case, where the challenge is again time bound. It's not at all time bound. It could take 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. We all know the business community always mocks a little bit at the judiciary, which to some extent is also, I mean, they have their own challenges. Judiciary has its own challenges of infrastructure. There's only so much that the judiciary can do beyond a point. But then, yeah, if you file a case, it would take years together, and the court fee, the stamp duty, court fee. I mean, most of the court fee would be a challenge. It used to be 1% for amounts above 25 lakh earlier, and in good old days, and below that it was 7%. So if you are trying to recover 15 lakhs and file or rather 20 lakhs, you file a case for 20 lakhs, you're paying 1.4 lakhs upfront even as court fee. Of course, those things have changed. The limits have changed now up to 1 crore, or beyond 1 crore has become 1%, less than 1 crore has become 3%. So there are changes in the law, but then yes, those issues are there. So in the background of all this, and given that more or less all of them are plagued with a common issue of being very slow, IBC was introduced in 2016 as a law by the government then, and Arun Jaitley, the late finance minister, who was pretty instrumental in getting IBC in place. The idea was to come up with a stress resolution asset framework. Here, something that is not there in the photo pictures here is the BIFR concept, which is basically SIC companies in Delhi used to go and register themselves in a body called the BIFR, which is the Board of Industrial Financial Reconstruction, where the objective is to do a resolution plan or a restructuring of the company. But eventually that became a tool of misuse, where people would just go get a registration, but then not really want to move the matter ahead because they would enjoy an endless moratorium. So with all these regimes put together, especially the winding up, liquidation, restructuring, BIFR, SARFAESI to some extent, IBC came as a comprehensive code. It is supposed to be very time bound. Originally, 180 days time is given with an option of 90-day extension. And it is applicable primarily to individuals, partnership firms, LLPs and corporates. But Right now, it's only for the LLPs and corporates, which is private limited companies and public limited companies, that the law is notified for the last 3.5 years. It is not yet notified for individuals and partnership forms. So that's a very common fundamental question that people have. So the law is in place, as in it's there in the insolvency code if you read it, but it's not notified. So you can't file a case of insolvency against a corporate or rather a case under IBC against an individual or a partnership firm or a sole proprietorship firm. You can go in the conventional old Presidency Insolvency Act if it's a sole proprietor, so on and so forth. A couple of fast track mechanisms have also been introduced, but they're for very limited category of companies. So yeah, that covers as to what was IBC and these things that you see, why, who, when, and how.